On a calm autumn morning in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the tightly knit military community was shaken by the news of Karen Ellis's disappearance. Karen, a 28-year-old Army sergeant stationed at Fort Bragg, had vanished without a trace. She was last seen the previous evening, and her sudden absence cast a heavy shadow over the suburban neighborhood she called home. Karen was known for her discipline, punctuality, and unwavering dedication to her duties. Her younger sister, Jenna, was the first to raise an alarm when Karen failed to check in after work. It was completely out of character for Karen, who was meticulous about maintaining contact with her family. The Ellis home, located on a quiet residential street near the base, became the focal point of the investigation. Karen's car remained parked in the driveway, but her phone and wallet were missing. The house itself was in pristine condition, which initially suggested that nothing was amiss. However, the lack of physical signs of struggle raised suspicions among the investigators. The neighborhood, a mix of military families and civilians, was known for its tranquility. Yet as news of Karen's disappearance spread, an unsettling unease took hold. Abigail Carter, a retired teacher who lived next door, noted that she had seen Karen sitting on the porch the evening before her disappearance. Karen appeared to be deep in thought, her expression marked by a somber intensity. Later that night, Abigail recalled hearing muffled sounds coming from the Ellis home. The noises, which included raised voices and the sound of something heavy being dropped, lingered in her memory but didn't initially alarm her. As part of the investigation, law enforcement canvassed the local area, interviewing neighbors and searching for any leads. Karen's colleagues at Fort Bragg were equally concerned. She had a reputation for reliability and strength, and her sudden absence left a noticeable void within her unit. Her commanding officer described her as an integral member of the team, someone who always went above and beyond to support her fellow soldiers. Despite an extensive search, initial efforts to locate Karen yielded no results. Surveillance footage from nearby stores and gas stations showed no sign of her presence on the night she was reported missing. The absence of any external sightings deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance. As hours turned into days, the sense of urgency intensified. Volunteers from the local community joined the search, combing through wooded areas and abandoned properties in hopes of finding any clue. Karen's family held on to hope, but doubts began to creep in as time passed without any new developments. The investigation's focus started to shift toward those closest to Karen. Law enforcement scrutinized her relationships, examining any potential conflicts that could provide insight into her disappearance. The puzzle pieces didn't quite fit, and suspicion began to grow that the answers lay much closer to home than anyone wanted to admit. Karen Ellis was a woman of principle, molded by a life of discipline and dedication. Born in a small town in Indiana, Karen grew up in a modest household with her parents and younger sister Jenna. Her father, a Vietnam War veteran, instilled in her a deep respect for service and resilience. Her mother, a school teacher, nurtured Karen's sense of compassion and her drive to help others. These early lessons formed the foundation of Karen's character and set her on a path toward a career in the military. Karen excelled in school, earning top grades and participating in athletics. She was particularly drawn to track and field, where she showcased her determination and endurance. Her teammates often described her as someone who inspired others to push past their limits. After high school, Karen enrolled in community college but felt unfulfilled. Seeking purpose and adventure, she decided to follow in her father's footsteps and enlist in the Army. From the moment she joined, Karen demonstrated natural leadership qualities. Her superiors recognized her potential early on, and she quickly rose through the ranks. Stationed at Fort Bragg, she became a sergeant at the age of 26, a significant achievement in her career. Karen's colleagues admired her for her unwavering dedication and ability to remain calm under pressure. She was often the first to volunteer for difficult assignments, earning the trust and respect of her team. Despite the demanding nature of her job, Karen maintained a strong connection with her family. She was particularly close to Jenna, who saw Karen as both a sister and a role model. Karen often encouraged Jenna to pursue her dreams and never settle for less than she deserved. The two sisters shared weekly phone calls, during which Karen would share stories about her experiences in the Army, balancing humor with heartfelt reflections on the challenges she faced. Karen's life took a new direction when she met Ryan Ellis at a charity event hosted by a mutual friend. Ryan, an IT technician with a quiet demeanor, seemed to complement Karen's driven and outgoing personality. Their connection was immediate, and within a year they were married. On the surface, their relationship appeared ideal. Karen's friends admired how supportive Ryan seemed of her demanding career, often attending military events by her side and speaking proudly of her accomplishments. However, cracks in their marriage began to emerge not long after the honeymoon phase ended. Ryan struggled with feelings of inadequacy, comparing his stable but unremarkable job to Karen's high-pressure, high-achievement lifestyle. He became increasingly insecure, often questioning Karen about her colleagues, particularly male ones. While Karen initially dismissed his behavior as concern, his actions became more controlling over time. Ryan's insecurities were compounded by financial strain. Karen was the primary breadwinner, which created an unspoken tension between them. Although Karen never expressed frustration over this dynamic, Ryan began to internalize resentment. He occasionally made offhand comments about feeling like less of a man, though Karen always reassured him that his contributions to their home were valued. Friends and family noticed subtle changes in Karen's demeanor over the years. Jenna, in particular, observed that Karen spoke less frequently about Ryan and more about her work. During one visit home, Karen admitted that she felt increasingly isolated in her marriage. She mentioned Ryan's tendency to monitor her phone and his growing hostility toward her spending time with friends or colleagues outside of work. Jenna urged Karen to consider whether this was the kind of relationship she wanted, but Karen, ever the optimist, believed she could work through their issues. By the time Karen disappeared, her marriage to Ryan had become a fragile shell of what it once was. While she continued to present a composed front to the world, those closest to her could see that something was weighing on her. Karen had confided in a colleague just weeks before her disappearance that she was considering a separation. She feared Ryan's reaction, knowing his temper could be unpredictable. Karen's life of service and her unyielding commitment to those she cared about made her disappearance all the more shocking. She was a person who thrived under pressure, someone who faced challenges head-on. To those who knew her, the idea that Karen would simply vanish without a word seemed inconceivable. Yet as the investigation into her disappearance deepened, the contrast between Karen's public strength and her private struggles became painfully clear. The night of Karen Ellis's disappearance unfolded quietly in Fayetteville, North Carolina, shrouded in the routine calm of suburban life. Karen, 28 years old and an Army sergeant, had returned home earlier than usual. Her disciplined nature showed in the neat placement of her belongings. A duffel bag by the door, a jacket carefully hung on the coat rack. Yet as the evening progressed, an undercurrent of tension seemed to hang over the Ellis household. Karen's neighbor, Abigail Carter, often observed the couple's movements from her window. On this particular evening, she noted Karen sitting alone on the porch, staring into the distance. Karen seemed lost in thought, her phone resting idle beside her. Abigail later remarked that Karen's posture struck her as unusually tense, but she brushed it off as nothing more than a stressful day. As night fell, faint sounds from the Ellis home interrupted the quiet. Abigail heard the faint murmur of voices, growing louder before stopping abruptly. The silence that followed was punctuated by a muffled thud. Abigail hesitated, but the noise ceased as quickly as it had begun, and she eventually dismissed it. Inside the Ellis home, the hours ticked by unremarkably, or so it seemed. Karen's car remained in the driveway, untouched. The house was silent by midnight, its stillness betraying none of the turmoil that would come to light in the days ahead. The next morning, Karen's absence was reported to the authorities. Ryan Ellis, her husband, calmly explained that Karen had left the house the previous evening to run errands and hadn't returned. He described how he had assumed she'd stayed at a friend's house after being delayed, but when morning came without any word from her, he decided to call the police. The police began their investigation by canvassing the neighborhood. Abigail shared what she knew, mentioning Karen's distant demeanor on the porch and the unusual noises from the house. These details were noted, but with no clear signs of struggle or foul play, the officers had little to act on initially. The search for Karen expanded quickly. Local stores and gas stations were checked for surveillance footage, but no sightings of Karen were found. Her car, parked in its usual spot, provided no clues. Investigators did notice a faint chemical smell in the living room. When questioned, Ryan casually attributed it to routine cleaning. While his explanation seemed plausible, it left a lingering sense of unease among the officers. 2 days after Karen was reported missing, a breakthrough emerged. During a search of a wooded area near the Ellis home, a search team found Karen's military ID badge partially buried in the dirt. The badge, scuffed and weathered, looked as though it had been discarded in haste. The discovery shifted the focus of the investigation to the woods, an area known for its dense foliage and isolation. The badge's location raised unsettling questions. Why would Karen's ID be in the woods? Did she leave it there, or was it planted to mislead searchers? The lack of footprints or additional evidence near the badge complicated the mystery. Despite extensive efforts, no further items were found in the vicinity. The finding of Karen's ID unsettled her family and friends. To those who knew her, Karen would never willingly part with something so integral to her identity as a soldier. Jenna Ellis, her younger sister, expressed disbelief, stating that Karen always kept her badge on her person, often tucked securely into her wallet. The badge became a focal point in the investigation, a clue as enigmatic as it was significant. Meanwhile, Karen's colleagues at Fort Bragg began to share details about her personal life. One co-worker mentioned that Karen had confided feelings of unease in recent weeks, though she hadn't gone into specifics. Another spoke of a noticeable change in her demeanor, describing her as preoccupied and less talkative. These revelations painted a picture of a woman grappling with unseen pressures, though the exact source remained unclear. As the investigation pressed on, the community of Fayetteville grew increasingly invested in Karen's story. Speculation abounded, with theories ranging from a random abduction to a targeted attack. The discovery of her badge added an air of grim possibility. Had Karen been taken against her will, or had something far more sinister occurred? The focus on the wooded area yielded no additional findings, frustrating search teams and investigators alike. Yet the badge served as a haunting reminder that Karen's disappearance was no accident. Someone somewhere had answers, and the search to uncover the truth had only just begun. As the days passed, the disappearance of Karen Ellis became more perplexing. Investigators, initially focused on searching for clues in nearby areas, began to re-examine the details provided by those closest to her. The case, which started as a routine missing person report, began to reveal cracks in its seemingly straightforward narrative. Ryan Ellis, Karen's husband, remained cooperative but distant. During interviews, he consistently repeated the same account of events. He explained how Karen had left the house that evening to run errands, yet he couldn't specify which stores she planned to visit. Detectives noted that Karen's car was still parked in the driveway, and security cameras from local businesses showed no sign of her that night. When pressed on these discrepancies, Ryan suggested that Karen might have gone for a walk instead, a claim that conflicted with statements from her sister and friends. According to them, Karen rarely walked at night, especially after long days at work. The pristine condition of the Ellis home also raised questions. Everything was meticulously clean, almost unnaturally so. One officer noticed a faint chemical odor lingering in the living room. When asked about it, Ryan casually explained that he had cleaned the floors that night, calling it part of his usual routine. While his response seemed plausible, the timing struck investigators as unusual. Who scrubs their floors late at night, particularly when their spouse is missing? Karen's military colleagues at Fort Bragg also provided valuable insights. They described her as someone deeply committed to her work, a woman who took every detail seriously. Her disappearance baffled them. One colleague recalled how Karen always kept her military ID badge close at hand, often tucked into her uniform or wallet. The discovery of that badge, partially buried in a wooded area 2 miles from the Ellis home, unsettled everyone who knew her. To them, Karen parting with such an important item willingly was unthinkable. The discovery of Karen's badge prompted an intensified search of the wooded area. Search teams combed through dense foliage, using cadaver dogs and drones to identify potential clues. During one of these searches, a new and unsettling piece of evidence was uncovered: a single hiking boot, half buried under leaves and soil. The boot matched Karen's size and appeared to have been intentionally hidden. Investigators speculated that whoever had discarded it was attempting to mislead the search or delay the discovery of further evidence. Meanwhile, Ryan's demeanor continued to attract attention. Though he appeared cooperative, his emotional detachment during interviews was striking. Detectives noticed how he rarely mentioned Karen in personal terms, focusing instead on logistical details about her disappearance. When asked about their relationship, Ryan downplayed recent arguments, describing them as typical marital disagreements. However, Jenna Ellis, Karen's sister, provided a starkly different perspective. She shared that Karen had confided in her about feeling increasingly isolated in her marriage, citing Ryan's controlling behavior and frequent outbursts of jealousy. Another complication arose when Abigail Carter, the Ellis family's next-door neighbor, reported seeing an unfamiliar car parked near the house on the night Karen vanished. The dark sedan, Abigail noted, remained parked across the street for nearly an hour before leaving around 10 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station captured a vehicle matching Abigail's description driving past shortly after that time. Though the footage didn't reveal the license plate, the car's presence added a layer of complexity to the investigation. As detectives worked tirelessly to piece together the fragmented puzzle, Karen's digital footprint provided additional insights. Forensic analysis of her phone records revealed a series of text messages sent from her number on the night she disappeared. The messages, including one to her sister Jenna that read, "Staying with a friend tonight, will call tomorrow," immediately raised suspicions. Jenna insisted the tone and brevity of the text were uncharacteristic of Karen, who typically wrote in full sentences and included personal touches in her messages. The last recorded signal from Karen's phone placed it near the wooded area where her badge and boot had been found, suggesting that someone had used the device to create a false trail. The investigation also uncovered anomalies in the Ellis family's financial records. Bank statements showed several large cash withdrawals from Karen's account in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Surveillance footage from one of the bank's ATMs showed a man resembling Ryan withdrawing cash using Karen's card. Though the footage wasn't clear enough to definitively identify him, it raised serious questions. Ryan denied any involvement, insisting that Karen must have made the withdrawals herself, though her friends and family found this explanation unlikely. As the search expanded and evidence accumulated, the community of Fayetteville became deeply invested in Karen's case. Vigils were held and search parties combed through abandoned properties and parks. While the military community at Fort Bragg rallied behind Karen's family, whispers of speculation began to circulate. Some theorized that Karen's disappearance might be tied to her military service, perhaps an act of revenge or a classified mission gone wrong. Others suspected someone closer to her, possibly a jealous friend or an acquaintance harboring resentment. The conflicting theories created an air of uncertainty, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear. Karen's disappearance was no accident, and someone close to her knew more than they were letting on. Chapter 5: The Chilling Discovery. As the investigation entered its second week, the sense of urgency surrounding Karen Ellis's disappearance grew heavier. Detectives had gathered a collection of small but troubling clues: her military ID badge buried in the woods, a single hiking boot hidden under leaves, suspicious financial transactions, and cryptic text messages from her phone. Yet the puzzle remained incomplete, and the lack of definitive answers weighed heavily on everyone involved. The search efforts intensified. Aerial drones equipped with infrared cameras scanned the dense wooded area near where Karen's belongings had been found. Ground teams combed through the terrain methodically, aided by cadaver dogs trained to detect human remains. The wooded area, though vast, offered a glimmer of hope. It was the first concrete lead in the case. On the 10th day of the search, a chilling discovery brought the investigation to a devastating turning point. Deep in the woods, beneath a thick canopy of trees, searchers uncovered a shallow grave. The disturbed earth gave way to the remains of a human body. Wrapped in layers of plastic sheeting, the area was immediately cordoned off, and forensic experts arrived to carefully exhume the site. Though the body was in an advanced state of decomposition, initial observations suggested it was consistent with Karen's physical profile. The discovery sent shockwaves through Fayetteville. News spread rapidly, and the once quiet neighborhood buzzed with speculation and grief. Karen's family, particularly her sister Jenna, was devastated. Though the body had yet to be formally identified, the evidence left little room for doubt. Jenna described the moment she received the call from investigators as surreal, a mix of anguish and a numb sense of inevitability. "I knew," she later said, "but hearing it out loud made it real." The forensic examination of the body revealed significant details. Karen's wrists and ankles bore deep ligature marks, suggesting she had been bound before her death. Her cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation, likely due to strangulation. The meticulous wrapping of the body in plastic indicated an attempt to delay decomposition and minimize the scent that might attract animals or detection. Whoever had committed this crime had gone to great lengths to conceal their actions. At the burial site, detectives uncovered additional items that shed light on the circumstances surrounding Karen's death. A length of heavy-duty rope was found nearby, partially buried and consistent with the ligature marks on Karen's body. Soil samples taken from the site matched traces of dirt found on the soles of Ryan Ellis's shoes, which had been collected earlier in the investigation. The match provided a crucial link, placing Ryan at the scene. Simultaneously, forensic analysis of the plastic sheeting used to wrap Karen's body revealed another critical clue. Investigators traced the material back to a local hardware store, where records showed a purchase of the exact brand and quantity of sheeting 2 days before Karen disappeared. Surveillance footage from the store showed a man resembling Ryan making the purchase. While the footage alone wasn't conclusive, it added another layer of suspicion to an already mounting case. With this new evidence, detectives brought Ryan in for further questioning. His demeanor remained calm, but his responses began to falter under the weight of the evidence. When confronted with the soil analysis and hardware store footage, Ryan hesitated before offering vague explanations. He claimed the soil on his shoes was from gardening and dismissed the plastic purchase as coincidental, stating that he had been planning to weatherproof some items in their garage. Meanwhile, Karen's friends and colleagues at Fort Bragg provided additional context that painted a clearer picture of the weeks leading up to her disappearance. One co-worker revealed that Karen had recently expressed fears about her safety. She had mentioned feeling watched and hinted at tensions in her marriage, though she hadn't elaborated further. These statements reinforced the growing suspicion that Karen's disappearance, and now her death, was not a random act of violence, but a deliberate and premeditated crime. As the investigation progressed, the discovery of Karen's body became a pivotal moment. It shifted the case from a search for a missing person to a homicide investigation. The meticulous efforts to conceal her death, combined with the methodical placement of misleading clues, suggested a perpetrator who was both calculated and desperate. While the evidence against Ryan continued to build, investigators remained cautious, determined to solidify their case before making an arrest. In the wake of the discovery, the community of Fayetteville came together to mourn Karen. Vigils were held at Fort Bragg, where her colleagues shared stories of her strength, compassion, and dedication. The Ellis home, once a symbol of suburban normalcy, now stood as a grim reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded behind its walls. The search for justice had taken on a new urgency, and the detectives vowed to uncover the full truth behind Karen's death. The investigation into Karen Ellis's death was becoming a complex web of evidence, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Though the discovery of her body had shifted the case into a homicide investigation, detectives refrained from drawing premature conclusions. Instead, they focused on the painstaking task of connecting each piece of evidence to build an airtight case. Karen's burial site became the center of forensic scrutiny. Soil samples were meticulously analyzed, revealing traces of a chemical compound consistent with industrial cleaners, a possible indication that the perpetrator had attempted to destroy evidence. The plastic sheeting used to wrap her body, already linked to a purchase made by Ryan Ellis, showed faint fingerprints. Though partial, they matched Ryan's prints, adding a critical layer of circumstantial evidence. Back at the Ellis home, investigators conducted another thorough search. Luminol testing in the living room revealed faint traces of blood near the base of the coffee table, an area that had been cleaned extensively. The discovery raised suspicions that the crime may have taken place inside the house. The blood was later confirmed to be Karen's through DNA analysis, cementing the living room as the probable crime scene. While the forensic evidence mounted, detectives continued interviewing individuals connected to Karen. Jenna Ellis, her sister, provided new insights into Karen's mental state in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Jenna recalled a phone call during which Karen expressed unease about her marriage. She said Ryan had been acting strange, Jenna told investigators. He was controlling before, but this was different. She mentioned feeling like she was being watched. This statement prompted detectives to review Ryan's digital activity. A subpoena for his electronic devices revealed disturbing patterns. His browsing history included searches for phrases like how to cover up a murder and best ways to dispose of a body. Investigators also found deleted GPS data from his phone, later recovered, that placed him in the wooded area where Karen's body was found on the night she disappeared. Each discovery further unraveled the veneer of normalcy Ryan had carefully constructed. To ensure they weren't missing alternative suspects, detectives expanded their scope to include other individuals in Karen's life. Abigail Carter, the next-door neighbor, mentioned a dark sedan parked across the street the night Karen vanished. Surveillance footage of the vehicle, though blurry, showed it driving in the direction of the woods shortly after 10 p.m. While Ryan owned no such car, investigators were reluctant to dismiss the possibility of an accomplice or unrelated third party. Adding to the intrigue, Karen's colleagues at Fort Bragg revealed that she had been working on a confidential project just before her death. While they were hesitant to disclose details, citing military protocols, some hinted that her work had involved sensitive information. One coworker suggested that Karen had expressed concerns about someone misusing that information, though it was unclear if this had any connection to her murder. The discovery of additional physical evidence deepened the mystery. Alongside Karen's hiking boot, search teams unearthed a small lockbox hidden beneath a pile of rocks in the woods. Inside were several items, including a wedding ring, an old photograph of Karen and Ryan from their honeymoon, and a handwritten note with the words, "You can't leave me," scrawled across it. The presence of the lockbox, intentionally hidden, suggested a deliberate effort to create a symbolic burial of Karen's relationship with Ryan. Investigators wondered if the note was a sinister message left by the killer or a cryptic attempt to shift blame. The investigation into Karen Ellis's death was becoming a complex web of evidence, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Though the discovery of her body had shifted the case into a homicide investigation, detectives refrained from drawing premature conclusions. Instead, they focused on the painstaking task of connecting each piece of evidence to build an airtight case. Karen's burial site became the center of forensic scrutiny. Soil samples were meticulously analyzed, revealing traces of a chemical compound consistent with industrial cleaners, a possible indication that the perpetrator had attempted to destroy evidence. The plastic sheeting used to wrap her body, already linked to a purchase made by Ryan Ellis, showed faint fingerprints. Though partial, they matched Ryan's prints, adding a critical layer of circumstantial evidence. Back at the Ellis home, investigators conducted another thorough search. Luminol testing in the living room revealed faint traces of blood near the base of the coffee table, an area that had been cleaned extensively. The discovery raised suspicions that the crime may have taken place inside the house. The blood was later confirmed to be Karen's through DNA analysis, cementing the living room as the probable crime scene. While the forensic evidence mounted, detectives continued interviewing individuals connected to Karen. Jenna Ellis, her sister, provided new insights into Karen's mental state in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Jenna recalled a phone call during which Karen expressed unease about her marriage. She said Ryan had been acting strange, Jenna told investigators. He was controlling before, but this was different. She mentioned feeling like she was being watched. This statement prompted detectives to review Ryan's digital activity. A subpoena for his electronic devices revealed disturbing patterns. His browsing history included searches for phrases like how to cover up a murder and best ways to dispose of a body. Investigators also found deleted GPS data from his phone, later recovered, that placed him in the wooded area where Karen's body was found on the night she disappeared. Each discovery further unraveled the veneer of normalcy Ryan had carefully constructed. To ensure they weren't missing alternative suspects, detectives expanded their scope to include other individuals in Karen's life. Abigail Carter, the next-door neighbor, mentioned a dark sedan parked across the street the night Karen vanished. Surveillance footage of the vehicle, though blurry, showed it driving in the direction of the woods shortly after 10 p.m. While Ryan owned no such car, investigators were reluctant to dismiss the possibility of an accomplice or unrelated third party. Adding to the intrigue, Karen's colleagues at Fort Bragg revealed that she had been working on a confidential project just before her death. While they were hesitant to disclose details, citing military protocols, some hinted that her work had involved sensitive information. One coworker suggested that Karen had expressed concerns about someone misusing that information, though it was unclear if this had any connection to her murder. The discovery of additional physical evidence deepened the mystery. Alongside Karen's hiking boot, search teams unearthed a small lockbox hidden beneath a pile of rocks in the woods. Inside were several items, including a wedding ring, an old photograph of Karen and Ryan from their honeymoon, and a handwritten note with the words, "You can't leave me," scrawled across it. The presence of the lockbox, intentionally hidden, suggested a deliberate effort to create a symbolic burial of Karen's relationship with Ryan. Investigators wondered if the note was a sinister message left by the killer or a cryptic attempt to shift blame. As the evidence piled up, the case against Ryan strengthened. Yet detectives remained methodical, ensuring that no stone was left unturned. The dark sedan remained a lingering question. Was it connected to Ryan or an unrelated piece of the puzzle? And what about Karen's military work? Could someone from her past have played a role in her death? These unanswered questions kept the investigation alive, even as the net around Ryan tightened. As the investigation deepened, every thread pulled seemed to unravel a larger tapestry of lies, deceit, and unsettling truths. Detectives were methodical in their approach, piecing together Karen Ellis's final moments with grim precision. The case was gaining momentum, but the ultimate answers remained elusive. Each day brought new discoveries that heightened the tension, propelling the investigation to a boiling point. The dark sedan Abigail Carter had seen parked near the Ellis home became a focal point of the investigation. Surveillance footage from a gas station near the wooded area revealed the same vehicle passing through on the night the Karen disappeared. Detectives launched an exhaustive search to identify its owner. Finally, a breakthrough came when the sedan was linked to a local contractor named Jason Harper, who frequently worked in the area. When questioned, Harper admitted to being near the Ellis home that evening, but claimed it was purely coincidental. He explained that he had been visiting a friend nearby and denied any knowledge of Karen or her disappearance. Harper's alibi initially seemed credible, but detectives were unconvinced. A search of his vehicle revealed faint traces of soil matching the wooded burial site. This discovery intensified suspicion, though Harper maintained his innocence. To complicate matters further, phone records placed Harper and Ryan Ellis in the same vicinity multiple times in the weeks leading up to Karen's death. This overlap raised the possibility of a connection between the two men, a lead that detectives were determined to pursue. The lockbox found near Karen's burial site continued to baffle investigators. The inclusion of personal items, Karen's wedding ring, a photograph, and the haunting note, suggested a deeply emotional motivation behind her murder. Handwriting analysis confirmed that the note had been written by Ryan, despite his vehement denials. Detectives theorized that the lockbox might have been part of a ritualistic act, perhaps symbolizing Ryan's desire to control or possess Karen, even in death. The discovery of the box marked a turning point in the case, reframing it not merely as a crime of passion, but as something more calculated and sinister. Yet the mystery of the box deepened when Harper's fingerprints were found on its exterior, hinting at his potential involvement in disposing of it. Meanwhile, forensic experts were meticulously analyzing evidence from Karen's burial site. Strands of hair found on the plastic sheeting used to wrap her body did not belong to Karen, raising the possibility of an accomplice. DNA testing revealed the hair matched an unidentified female, introducing another layer of complexity to the case. Additionally, Karen's autopsy revealed defensive wounds on her hands, suggesting she had fought back during the attack. This discovery fueled speculation that someone other than Ryan might have been present during her final moments. Was Harper involved more directly than he had admitted? Or was there a third party who had yet to surface? The partial fingerprints on the plastic sheeting and rope used to bind Karen's body were also scrutinized. Though they were consistent with Ryan's prints, an additional partial print was identified, belonging to neither Ryan nor Karen. This new piece of evidence only deepened the mystery, pushing detectives to widen their scope. Digital evidence continued to tighten the net around Ryan. Forensic recovery of his GPS data showed that he had visited the wooded area multiple times in the weeks before Karen's disappearance. One trip, just days before the murder, coincided with the purchase of the plastic sheeting and rope. Detectives theorized that Ryan had been scouting locations, preparing for what he intended to do. However, GPS records also placed Harper's vehicle in the vicinity on 2 separate occasions. When confronted with this evidence, Harper grew increasingly agitated. He claimed he had been hired by Ryan for unrelated work and denied any knowledge of Karen's murder. Despite his assertions, the mounting circumstantial evidence made it clear that his role in the case was more than incidental. As investigators closed in on Ryan and Harper, a sudden twist shook the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen Ryan arguing with a woman outside a hardware store on the evening of Karen's disappearance. The witness described the woman as blonde and wearing a military-style jacket, a description that didn't match Karen. Surveillance footage corroborated the witness's account, showing Ryan in a heated exchange with an unidentified woman. The appearance of this mystery woman sent detectives scrambling for answers. Who was she, and what was her connection to Ryan? Could she be the source of the unidentified female hair found at the crime scene? The new lead injected a sense of urgency into the investigation, as it suggested that Ryan might not have acted alone. Detectives decided to bring Ryan in for another round of questioning. This time, they were armed with the full arsenal of evidence: the soil samples, the lockbox, the GPS data, and the fingerprints. Ryan remained defiant, his denials becoming more erratic and defensive. When confronted with the DNA evidence of the unidentified hair, Ryan hesitated. His confident demeanor cracked as he stumbled over his words, offering vague and contradictory explanations. Detectives pressed him harder, revealing the surveillance footage of the argument outside the hardware store. Who was she? They asked repeatedly, their voices calm but unyielding. Ryan refused to answer, his silence only deepening their resolve. Simultaneously, Harper was brought in for questioning under the guise of clarifying his involvement with Ryan. Detectives subtly hinted at the growing body of evidence linking him to the crime, carefully observing his reactions. Harper's nervousness was palpable, and while he denied direct involvement, his evasive answers only fueled suspicion. The case was reaching a boiling point. Detectives had constructed a damning narrative linking Ryan and Harper to Karen's death, yet critical questions remained unanswered. Who was the mystery woman? What role, if any, did she play in the crime? And why had Ryan gone to such lengths to cover his tracks, enlisting Harper's potential assistance in the process? The pressure on both men was immense. Ryan's demeanor suggested a man cornered, while Harper's growing paranoia hinted at a deeper involvement than he was willing to admit. As the investigation reached its crescendo, detectives knew they were on the verge of breaking the case wide open. Chapter 8: The Final Truth. The investigation into Karen Ellis's murder had reached its critical juncture. Detectives, armed with a mountain of evidence and an intricate web of connections, were poised to uncover the final pieces of the puzzle. The pressure on Ryan Ellis and Jason Harper was immense, and the cracks in their stories began to split wide open. The breakthrough came when forensic analysts traced the unidentified female DNA found on Karen's body to a woman named Sandra Miller, a former co-worker of Ryan. Sandra, who worked briefly with Ryan at his previous IT job, had left under mysterious circumstances years earlier. A deeper dive into her history revealed a pattern of erratic behavior and an obsession with Ryan, even after he had married Karen. Sandra's name had appeared in Ryan's phone records months before Karen's disappearance, though he had never mentioned her in any of his statements. Detectives tracked down Sandra at her home, where she initially denied any involvement in Karen's death. Her calm demeanor faltered, however, when investigators presented her with the forensic evidence. Faced with the DNA match and connections to Ryan, Sandra broke down, offering a chilling account of her involvement. Sandra admitted that Ryan had contacted her weeks before Karen's death, asking for her help in confronting his wife. According to Sandra, Ryan had portrayed Karen as controlling and emotionally abusive, a narrative Sandra, who was still infatuated with him, was all too willing to believe. Ryan's manipulation of Sandra became evident as she recounted how he had convinced her to meet him at the hardware store the night of Karen's murder, ostensibly to discuss how to save his marriage. On the night Karen disappeared, Sandra claimed she had been instructed to wait in the dark sedan near the Ellis home, while Ryan handled the situation inside. She described hearing muffled shouts and the sound of something heavy being dragged before Ryan emerged, pale and frantic, and ordered her to follow him to the wooded area. Once there, Ryan coerced Sandra into helping him bury Karen's body, using the lockbox as a twisted token of closure. Sandra admitted to leaving the strands of her hair behind, though she insisted she had no role in Karen's death itself. Armed with Sandra's confession, detectives confronted Ryan one final time. His composed facade crumbled as they laid out the full scope of evidence against him. The soil samples, GPS data, surveillance footage, and now Sandra's detailed account left no room for denial. Ryan initially tried to pin the blame solely on Sandra, claiming she had acted out of jealousy and killed Karen without his knowledge. But the weight of the forensic evidence and Sandra's corroborated timeline of events made his lies transparent. Faced with the overwhelming case against him, Ryan ultimately confessed. He admitted that his controlling behavior toward Karen had spiraled into rage when she threatened to leave him. On the night of her death, their argument had escalated violently. In a fit of anger, he strangled Karen, panicked, and called Sandra for help, spinning a web of lies to enlist her complicity in the cover-up. Ryan's confession was cold and devoid of remorse, painting a chilling portrait of a man consumed by jealousy and control. Jason Harper's role in the case, while initially suspicious, was ultimately revealed to be peripheral. The traces of soil in his car were linked to unrelated work in the area, and his interactions with Ryan were confirmed to be coincidental. He was cleared of involvement, though the scrutiny he endured left a lasting impact on his reputation. With the truth finally exposed, Ryan and Sandra were arrested and charged. Ryan faced first-degree murder charges, while Sandra, though complicit, was charged as an accessory after the fact. The trial drew national attention, with Karen's family and military colleagues attending every session to honor her memory. Ryan's calculated attempts to control Karen, even in death, stood in stark contrast to her legacy as a strong, compassionate woman who had dedicated her life to serving others. During sentencing, Karen's sister Jenna addressed the court. Her voice, though steady, carried the weight of profound loss. Karen's life was stolen by the very person who promised to protect her, she said, but her legacy will not be defined by the cruelty of her death. It will be defined by her courage, her compassion, and the love she gave to everyone around her. Ryan was sentenced to life without parole, and Sandra received a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation. The trial's conclusion brought a sense of closure to Karen's family, though the scars of her loss would remain. In the aftermath, Karen's story became a rallying cry for awareness about domestic violence and the hidden struggles many endure behind closed doors. Her colleagues at Fort Bragg established a scholarship in her name, dedicated to supporting women pursuing leadership roles in the military. The community of Fayetteville came together to honor Karen's memory, ensuring her legacy of strength and service would endure. Though justice was served, the case of Karen Ellis left an indelible mark on all who followed it. It served as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath seemingly perfect facades and the resilience of those left behind to seek the truth. The tragic case of Karen Ellis underscores the devastating impact of control, manipulation, and unchecked anger within personal relationships. It serves as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing the warning signs of domestic violence, even when hidden behind a facade of normalcy. Karen's story highlights the need for open communication, support networks, and resources for those who feel trapped in toxic relationships. This case also reveals the insidious ways manipulation can extend beyond the immediate victim, as seen in Sandra Miller's involvement. It is a cautionary tale about the power of influence and the dangers of blind loyalty when truth and morality are compromised. The legacy of Karen Ellis is one of strength and resilience. Her life, marked by service and compassion, inspires a call to action, to create communities where individuals feel safe, valued, and heard. In her memory, the fight against domestic violence continues, and her story encourages us to confront difficult truths, seek justice, and foster empathy for those suffering in silence. The story has been edited to ensure personal privacy and security regarding names and locations. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to subscribe to see the latest and most thrilling family crime stories.